welcome to the Teacher's Lounge. I am here today with Esther Ciganda, and we are going to be talking about the United States versus Spain. And we're going to be talking about how are we handling the pandemic, teaching in the pandemic. So we're going to have a really good conversation about our different school systems and the resources that we're providing and how it has changed the education model. Miss Esther, can you please start us off by just telling us who you are
Okay.
and what you do?
Welcome everyone, and thank you, Franchesca, for having me. It's an honor to be here. And so I am originally from Washington State. I'm a daughter of immigrants. So that is a key detail to kind of continue my story. So I am a 23-year veteran teacher. I taught for 16 years in the States, and multiple subjects. I went from biology, chemistry, Spanish, all levels, to link crew, leadership, and also coached various things like from Science Olympiad to sports. And being a daughter of immigrants, I had this desire to always go back to where my parents are from. They're from the Basque region in the Basque country, which is in northern Spain, southern France.
Okay.
And so I set a goal that I wanted to go back there someday. Well, it originally was, when I student taught, but it didn't happen until I turned 40. So after 16 years, I left the United States and I came over here to Europe. And I started teaching. And so I've been teaching over here now English, so I go from the American style systems to now just focusing on teaching English to, English language learners, not English as a subject in the States. So it's been a fascinating transition. And from there, I've evolved into the last few years as becoming a teacherpreneur, edupreneur, entrepreneur, whatever we want to call it, and just continuing that. So now my titles, I think of myself as an educator, an entrepreneur. I'm also a podcaster. And basically, I just love helping others to make the changes that are going to bring them that freedom, happiness, and never to be held back. Like a lot of people hold themselves back and they're always like, I'm so envious of what you're doing. Don't be. Why don't you take action to do something about it? Do it. That's what we should all be doing. So that in a nutshell is who I am.
Yes, and I love that. A lot of people do hold back. And I think we saw the pandemic kind of change that, people taking risks, starting things, launching things. And I'm glad that we were able to meet. We met on Clubhouse. And and I see a lot of teacherpreneurs on Clubhouse, and it's kind of evolved in its own thing. So I'm loving that part. And I'm glad that I was able to connect with you and that we can have this conversation. I think it's a conversation that we definitely need. It's always good to learn from others. And it's always good to just kind of share resources and just how are you doing it and how are we doing it and what can we take from this conversation today? So we're going to just jump right on in it. I'm going to kind of just for the audience kind of explain our structure here with the United States. We start off with elementary school, and then we have our secondary, which consists of, middle school and high school. So the kids go through K through fifth grade, or sometimes pre-K through fifth grade. And that would be 4 to approximately maybe 11 years old. And then they jump into middle school, and that's 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. And then they go to high school, and that's your 9th through 12th. Now that's the model. Typically you have some different forms of that where you have K through 6th grade and things like that, but that is our model. And then whenever you go to high school, you tend to choose kind of like your path, like your electives and what you might want to experience with when you go to college. And so for me, I teach at an academy school, and there's not a lot of academy schools in the US. That's starting to trend now. And so with an academy school, it's almost like a little mini college. The kids go to the academy school their 9th grade year, and they get exposed to all the different academies in that school. And then when they get to their 10th grade year, they choose the academies. So for us, we have health, we have business, law, and STEM. And so they get to choose which track, and they stay on that and they finish up at the end. They typically take a test and get some type of certification or just, finish that pathway, and then they go off to college. And so that's our model here. Tell us a little bit about yours.
Okay. So uniquely, I have a unique situation. So I live in France, but I actually teach in Spain. And I'm actually teaching in an academy school in Spain, but it's an English academy. So I've worked alongside where our English academy has been part of the local school system. So that's where I'm going to share with you a little bit about what the local school systems look like up here.
Okay.
Spain is a small little country. It's about the size of Texas. So if we want to compare kind of just size wise, the entire country has one system that they implement countrywide. So it's not like in the United States where every state is running their own thing. They all have their own state exams. And, like Franchesca, you explained, fundamentally, the United States has that system, that K through 12 system, and we are starting to see more variations of charter schools that are being implemented. But in Spain, it is directed by the government. So everyone does the same thing. And that was really fascinating to see. I'm like, whoa, very different. And so what happens here is they start school when they are 3 years old. Wow. And so very different, because we think about in the States, we start kids off at school at 5. And some of them, depends on when they're born, at 6. Here, it's not about when you fall on the calendar year of birth rate, it is by the year. So imagine all the 4-year or all the 3-year-olds of this year, starting, like, I'm just going to say numbers. Oh my gosh. I'm going to say for example, from 20. So all the kids that were born in 2020, from January 2020 to December 2020, that is your year. They all go to school together. Okay. Which is really different than how, at least from us. Yeah. So that was interesting, because I see like why my cousin, who is a December baby and I'm January, in the States, we would have never been in the same age group. I would have been a year older in school, but here we are seen as being the same age. Yes. So I learned that by being in this system here.
Do you think that, let me ask you something. What do you think the benefits are from that? Or do you think that, does that help or hurt?
I haven't seen, since I'm not an elementary teacher, except here, I had to start teaching elementary kids. So it's really hard for me to say how it is. But what I always noticed years ago, this is when I was in high school, my cousins came to visit us from Spain, and they came over, and I was in high school taking calculus class as a senior, and they were 2 years younger than me. Like, you're still taking this? We took this years ago. And I'm like, what? How did? So I don't know necessarily if it's good or bad, because, and we'll get into this, sure, they're starting early, but the path is the same, essentially. It's just getting them into the workforce maybe earlier. But I see some of the pros and cons. And one of the things that the United States does extremely well, and I want people to recognize that, is the way we create this very well-rounded individual. At least we try. And our schools offer so much to students, whereas in Spain, there is no extracurricular type classes. You don't have a drama, you don't have band, you do not have choir, you don't have art. You have none of those electives here that we do in the States. And it's one of those that my students here are always like, you are so lucky. And I teach them, I show them my websites of where I taught, and they're like, wow. Yeah. So we teach such a culturally different way, like trying to create this well-rounded individual. Might not be the best system either, but we are looking to show there are different pathways in the States. Don't take just this path and decide. You can choose many.
Yeah. Okay, good. And I like, you said that the system has, the government sets up the same system for everyone. I could see some benefits from that. What do you think about that piece? Because that's not how it is here. You got your states, and then your states have your counties, and your counties can do whatever. And then at the end, it looks different for everyone. So what do you think? Yeah.
Well, I really did like that, because how, like you just said, when students move around, what's one of the things that happens in the States is we are very mobile. People move easily. Here they don't. Okay. So it's one of the things that in the States, you have kids that are moving from school district to school district, out of state. And then when they move, it's like, this poor kid doesn't even have anything that we offer, or they're not at the level that we would say he should be or she should be. And so that's where I think our own system, we hurt children who are moving around. And even as educators, gosh, our credentials aren't valid from state to state because every state has different teaching requirements as what we need to. And that certification was hard when I moved from Washington to Idaho, because what Idaho requested wasn't the same what Washington did, but Washington had higher standards to be a teacher. But Idaho was like struggling with trying to validate me. And it was hard to be like, but I've done way more than your teachers are required to do. How do you not like want to check the box?
Yeah.
So I think
room for improvement. Is room for improvement in that area. Absolutely.
Huge room for improvement. And so I wanted to continue from the school systems, then they go elementary, the junior high process. So then what high school looks like is quite different from the states, because they are going to school until they're 18. But those 2 years that they started earlier, their 2 years left of high school is almost like our community college level type classes.
Oh, wow.
They don't call it that. It's called bachiller, which is basically like high school. But as you and I were conversing yesterday, it's the tracking. They need to decide, are they going social studies or are they going science track? And so those last 2 years, they've already made a decision and they can't switch.
You can't switch.
And so they are stuck in that system. They've made a decision, which to me, that's a hindrance, because I'm like, why can't I change? If I want to, all of a sudden I'm psychology, but I want to switch to, maybe being a mathematician, why can't I switch? But they don't let them. You're in that for now. And then you have to go pushing towards these final exams that are held nationally. It's a final national exam that everyone does the exact same exam on the same day.
Wow.
And from there, if you pass it, that's where you're going to get the green light to go to college. It's similar to our SATs, but it's held on the exact same day. So it's and it's, I think, more intensive than the SAT, where it's every different subject that they've had to cover at school.
Wow.
So,
and with
quite different.
Social studies and your science track, so they're choosing those. And so is like, for here we have like business, and we have, law, and we have, arts and stuff like that. So is that embedded in those tracks at all?
That would be the social science track. So like your business would all go that way. You want to be an English, or you want to be a psychologist, that's social science track. They label it like that, but it's very like science and anything that encompasses science, anything from being an architecture to, I don't know, an engineer, anything.
Okay.
And then the social science is everything else. So it's a big umbrella like this. And then, yeah.
Okay, very interesting. Okay. And so we've gotten that out the way. We know our models, how it is there in Spain, and how it is here in the United States. So now let's fast forward. Let's talk about the pandemic. Okay. So March of 2020 is when it kind of hit us with, we all had to be sent home. Okay. Everybody was sent home, and everybody became virtual teachers and virtual learners, and just overnight. And so for us, it had its ups and downs. We really found out here that, a lot of kids didn't have the technology that they needed. And so we were in just fast-paced mode, trying to figure out how to get these students a laptop, a hotspot, and working on getting them set up so that they can even just join the class. We had to teach parents how to use Zoom and have sessions on how to use the technology. So a lot of our time spent once we were sent home was dealing with just that technology curve, teaching people how to use it, how to get on. I literally remember, getting on with the parent and the student and teaching them how to share their screen so that I could navigate, showing them how to get to the different activities and things so that they can complete their work. So that was pretty much that March until the end of the school year. And then a lot of our kids all around the United States was kind of just burnt out with the digital learning process. So we kind of saw a decline towards the end of that school year, April, May, with participation, because it's a lot to be online, for 8 hours. And that was what we were doing at the time. And then some school districts figured that wasn't the best thing. And so they started building in off days. You're on this day and then you're off this day, or flex days and things like that. And so I would say that March to May time was just learning, just trying to figure this thing out, trying to get the students the technology they needed, and just trying to make it work. We were in survival mode. So what happened for you all during that time?
The same for us. It was, the government said on March 12th that would be our last day of school. March 13th, everything shut down. Mm-hmm. So what happened, and I get to see the perspective of what happened in Spain, France, and the United States. Spain closed the schools so March 13th, nobody went to school, and that was a Friday. Mm-hmm. And by Monday, the entire country shut down. Mm-hmm. So as I try to tell people in the States, the lockdown that was experienced in the United States was not the lockdown that was experienced in Spain. Like, they were literally in jail. Okay. They were locked into their homes. They could go to the store one person at a time from their household. Wow. Streets it was like a war zone. Like, that's the pictures were of streets that were empty. So they weren't allowed, there was no one allowed out of their home. They were stuck in there. France did it differently. Like, we were put into our homes and we had 1 hour we could be out of the house, and we had almost a mile radius that we could walk and get exercise. Okay. So I could walk and see like the Spanish, because I live right on the border, and I'm like, wow, they're locked in. Wow. And they could get $600 fines if they were caught outside. So yeah. And it was, so that's what happened, like, socially. In the schools, our academy, they saw the problem coming. I'll never forget this. It was the Monday before March 13th. And my boss said, okay, I'm going to be sending you an email today with all our different codes because of this. And I was like, come on, really? He's like,
I was the same way.
I go, I've been hearing about it.
Me too.
And I'm like, yeah, come on. Right. He's like, and he was dead serious. He's like, oh, no. We're anticipating that the government's going to shut down this week or next week, but we're ready. What he had done is he had moved everything. All the classes were already programmed onto Zoom. And we also outsourced to another school here. So we do all their English classes to this actual public school here. And they didn't want us to use Zoom. They wanted Google Meet. So he had already coordinated all the classes into Google Meet. He sent those all to us. We were sure to have all our books all online. So we had access to all our teacher books, everything, the students as well. We didn't miss a beat. So that Friday, the 13th, I did have classes, but we didn't have classes that day because it was a day to what's going on, get the emails to the parents. On Monday, so 14, 15, Monday the 16th, session was back on. We didn't miss a single beat. And we taught live. And of course, a lot of it wasn't like teach. For me, I might have spent a half hour because I teach like 2 days a week, but it's 3-hour class, or it's an hour and a half for 3 hours per week. And a lot of the time was, how are you doing? How's it going? Really making sure my students were okay, especially the teenagers and the little kids. They're happy as could be, they were just always like trying to get mom and dad out of the Zoom, like, get out. And it's so cute. They were excited to, tell me about their day. And teenagers were just like, oh my gosh. Yeah. And so it was making sure they were fundamentally okay. So that's our academy. The school systems here were a lot like what you described. They were scrambling because how do we ensure that everyone has a computer at home? How do we get this to happen? Most people here, and like I said, it's such a small country. So I know in the States, I know like the issues with making sure everyone had Wi-Fi and everything. Here, Wi-Fi, those things aren't as hard to access. It's a lot cheaper than the States. So the majority have it, or they have it on their phone. And so we didn't find an issue with that at all. And I didn't hear about it from the schools, but it was basically the education needed to first, teachers that are not used to teaching that way. Yes. Not all teachers are that flexible. Neither are maybe the school directors, the principals either, because it's a whole different mindset, like, how are we going to do this? It's not just lecture. You can't lecture the whole time. And how to do different interactive activities, etc. And so they weren't getting into it. Like I'd talk to my students because we didn't miss we continued, and I'd say, what are you guys doing at school? Nothing.
Mhm.
And some of them were really worried because it was their last year. They knew that these final exams were coming. I'm like, you're not doing anything. They hadn't heard from their teachers. There were no emails. And I kept telling them, well, be patient because it's a new world for everyone. They're probably trying to figure out what's going on. So I could see that different schools, because my group of 20 kids all come from different schools. And
Mhm.
some of the kids started to get contact from their teachers, and others not even till
Right.
the end. They didn't hear hardly boo from their teachers.
Mm.
So the school system here, the public had the same issues.
Yeah.
How to ensure, how to connect. And then the teachers that kind of just did this,
Yeah.
because they had their own issues. Maybe they have kids at home, and how do I take care of my own kids, let
Mhm.
alone someone else's? So yeah.
I like that. And so the same thing here, you had some teachers who, like me, I'm really good with technology. That was just like, okay. As a matter of fact, I had already trained my students how to do the Zoom thing. We had literally implemented Google Hangouts once I started this school about 4 years ago. We were meeting with I guess it's a club that we have after school. We would meet on Google Hangouts after school because for us, we have a transportation issue as far as our students can't stay after school because they don't have parents that can come pick them up. So I had to navigate and figure out how to still have meetings with the students when they can't stay after school. So I had already started that process with them, and they knew how to get on a Google Hangouts or a Zoom. We've actually done that, but I'm just one of those teachers. I like innovation. I will implement it as soon as it comes out. If it's something new, oh, we got to try it. But there are some teachers that are not there. They do not like the technology. And so we have the same issues, but different school districts, including ours, kicked in with training. During that March, May, there were professional developments to help navigate teaching online. How can you make a virtual class interesting? How can you get through the steps? And so that is what, we had to implement. It was just really just kind of, we kicked in and tried to figure it out, and the teachers kind of got on board with that. And as far as something else you said, our seniors and our high school students they were exhausted, especially our seniors.
Oh, yeah.
They were not only exhausted, they were worried. They were like, are we going to get graduation? Are we going to get prom? And also, I had students who were getting COVID, and their parents. And so mentally, it was just too much for them. And then they didn't get graduation, and they didn't get prom, and then they got depressed. And so it was a lot of, we had to check in with them, figure out how to make it exciting for them, try to, navigate and have something fun implemented for them virtually, but it wasn't the same. And so I really do feel, bad about that. I actually had one of my seniors that graduated last year just emailed me this morning and was like, hey, Miss Thompson, I really enjoyed your class, and I wanted to see if I could get this. This is something that I missed out on last year. Are you still offering this? And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even think about that. They're going to be contacting me about the thing that they were supposed to get last year that we couldn't do. So it was a lot for the students. So it seems like we have some similarities and differences as far as what happened during that pandemic piece, right? So now the new school year is here, right? And so August is when we start. August of 2020, we started. And so our district and a lot of school districts, you had either you're not going back, we're just going to continue being virtual learners, or you're going to have a hybrid model where the students come in for a certain portion of the week and then virtually for the rest of the week, or different models of that. And so for my district, it was more so you can choose to be a virtual learner, or you can come in person. And so now, we have so the teachers were teaching both virtually and in person at the same time. And And so that's where we are with my district. You have some other districts, the kids didn't come back and now they're starting to now. And so what did that look like for you all?
The same. So the school districts, they had already started to figure out, well, the government had opened up already at the end of May, June. So throughout the summer, it stayed open, with COVID increasing, doing its flexing, up and down, and everything basically closed or on, standby, because it's a big touristy area where I'm at, but this affected all of Spain as well.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened is the school year was coming, but they had done the preparations during the summer, like to say, okay, what's it going to look like? How can we squeeze? How can we make sure that we meet the requirements to get everybody into the classrooms? And so the local schools, what they did is that everyone's in school unless someone doesn't want to be in school, like the parents say no. So they've pushed for that. And everyone is in school. They've got enough separation. Their hours were reduced, I think, by 2 hours. And so that, I think, might be like for recuperating some certain, hours or makeup tests, because they are a big testing environment here. So they're always doing makeup tests, it feels like to me, watching these high schoolers. So that's what they took off. But they continued on. And I know for the students, they were much happier. Mm-hmm. That was what they needed, the social interaction, and they've been fine. What they tell me is just the way certain teachers still, because we're all very different, and some of their teachers were not supportive of being back at school, which I know in the States has been the same way. How teachers have felt that they're not being protected. What about their own health? And so they have felt the negative energy either from teachers who don't want to be there, don't want to be teaching in this environment, that everyone should be home, to the teachers who have been like, yes, this is much better for them because they don't want to be teaching online. My academy, what we did is, because we have small classes, so if we are a class that can't fit this, I'm thinking not in English right now, the measurements, you have certain standards, you have to have the separation between the students and the desks. Mm-hmm. If you can accommodate all the students, then all of them are in class with us. If they can't, like for example, 2 of my classes are too big. So what happens is I've got 5 of them in class with me, mm-hmm. and then the other 5 are live via Zoom at home. So that hybrid type style where I'm teaching at the same time, but to a group here and a group online. Okay. And that's what we've done. And then anytime any of them, because the school's here, so if anytime someone's been exposed or there's someone that they know has a case of they've been tested for COVID, the entire class at school gets put in, quarantine. Oh. So then the kids, what they do is they connect from home. They'll send me a message or they'll call the school, the academy, and say, today I'm connecting from home. Okay. So one day I literally was in school by myself on the computer, and the kids were at home on their own computers. So it was that I was like, this is weird. It's like last year, I'm alone here at school. Yeah. So
did most of their students elect to come back?
Yeah,
they did. Okay. Yeah. And that wasn't the case for us.
I know.
In the US. Yeah. The kids, I think when we opened our doors, my school has about 2,500 students and about 400 of them came back. So a lot and I want to say that was primarily parent choice. I think here, because of the exposure and how we handled the pandemic and the death rates, all of that, I think it just put fear in parents around the world, around the US, and they just chose. And that was one of the reasons why I decided not to have my own child go back to school, because I'm like, my God, I have to remind her to put her mask on and to wash her hands. I'm not going to be at school with her to teach her these things. And so I said, nah, she's going to stay at home this year. So for us, we just did not have a big flux of students in person. And so, and then I want to say the in-person kids, I don't know, maybe it was the same for you, had kind of a different expectation. I don't think that they were thinking that they were going to be, in person and the Zoom at the same time, and so that whole model was kind of, I guess, in a sense, maybe they didn't, they didn't really like that. They thought that school was going to be business as normal for, they were going to be able to participate and move around and do things, and you just can't. So their expectations, the in-person kids, was just kind of like, oh, this is what we're doing. So yeah, we can't be touching and next to each other and all in each other's face.
No high fives or nothing.
None of that.
No.
So and it is what it is. And so now we are preparing. So now we can get to where we are now. As far as next school year, it looks like a lot of the states are electing to just, everyone comes back.
Okay.
We just made an announcement with our district. Everyone will be re-enrolled to come back to in-person learning. If you choose not to do in-person learning, then you will have to register to this separate, virtual academy. So it looks like a lot of school districts are trying to do transition back in. We're actually going to even have an in-person graduation this year. We're going to have an in-person prom. So we're trying to get back to normal, especially since the vaccine people are getting it. And so it looks like we will be at a new norm, and kids will be coming back to school. How about you all? Is it the same, you thinking?
Yeah, the vaccine is slow coming here. So yeah. So I hear you guys are all getting vaccine and I'm like, who knows what it'll get here. You're hearing of some elderly are starting to get vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a recall on one of the vaccines that came from England. So there's an issue with that. And so it's slow process. And we still are up and down. Like, for example, in France, I'm still in curfew. I have a 7 p.m. curfew that it got extended last week. Last Saturday was the first time. We've been from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. We're stuck in our homes. We are not allowed to leave. And Spain, the same, they close at 8 p.m. Everything closes. Wow. And they extended it to 10 p.m. So we're still in a real lockdown type deal here. And so the schools, I think, are going to continue. What they don't have are, the social activities like after school sports. Mm-hmm. They open and close those because when the numbers have increased, that has changed. So they close the sports, the after school sports, which there isn't an after school sports program like there is as developed in the States, but there is. Mm-hmm. And so they open it, they close it depending on what the government says. If the government says our numbers are spiking, the first thing to go is sports, but not school. But it's also because the government itself economically cannot, it won't function, I think, if school were to close again with all the different businesses. Because what happened with all the businesses that closed last year, everyone was put on unemployment, basically like this, preempted type unemployment. So the government was paying everybody. Yeah. And the government doesn't have that money. Like, States is well off compared to Spain. Spain's second world country. So the schools, I think, I think it's a yes or yes. We have to figure out how we're going to keep going. And it's been successful. The cases at schools have been very low. Every once in a while, you'll hear a pocket of an outbreak in a school. Mm-hmm. So what happens is all those kids are sent home. The entire class is quarantined until they all pass the COVID test and shows negative. Mm-hmm. And it's been functioning like that. So
yeah. And y'all have a mask mandate there?
Mandate, even for the two governments are different. In Spain, even for walking to your car, walking on the streets, you have to wear a mask always. Okay. In France, to go into the businesses, like to the store, to do your grocery shopping, whatever, you have to wear a mask. But when I walk on the street, I don't have to wear my mask.
Okay. So it seems like we're here a little more flexible. Our businesses have started to open back up. Extracurricular activities are opening back up and probably started last year sometime. And some places have mask mandates, like some stores might say you can't come in here without a mask on, but it's not. You can go outside and walk the streets without your mask on and things like that. So I'm just hoping that, in our schools, though, I will say, are doing a really good job of keeping the students safe. Most of the schools here that had the in-person learning, equip those classrooms with cleaning supplies, the
Yep.
janitors and custodians clean, clean, clean. You see them cleaning all the time. So that was really, really big. And so I think that helps with keeping our numbers down as well, and breakouts down in the schools as well. So that's a good thing. So I think we kind of covered, was one other thing we did talk about the lost students. I think that is something that we're dealing with here. When the pandemic happened, you saw that we could not find different students. They're not logging into the Zoom, they're not in person. And so I think over the summer, you got districts that are going to be dealing with that, trying to figure out what happened to these students. Did y'all have that at all?
Not that I noticed, no.
Okay.
Yeah, but I have heard of in the States, where these kids that just disappeared, and you wonder what's going on at home. Where, wow. But here I haven't heard of anybody that's been lost. Like, we've lost a couple kids at the academy, but it could be because who knows, a lot of times if people are at home working remote, mom and dad needed the computer, so they're like, we can't be using the same computer, I have to use it. So we did see the debate with parents that took their kids out of the academy because they only had one computer at home. Okay. So, and we lost it that way.
Yeah. And I think a lot of our law students have to, I think once they do the research, whereas we opened back up, parents had to go back to work. And they have little kids at home, and one district might be like, hey, we're not doing in person, it's only virtual. And so you got your high school kid who has to watch their little brother and sister because mom and dad is at work. That's a lot of responsibility. So they're not going to be able to log into class. And I think once we get out of this and start doing our studies of how this impacted us and what happened to those students, I think you're going to find out a lot. That's one of the key pieces, I think.
And I think I wanted to touch on two things that you said, as a parent and your decision, and my brother and sister-in-law, they had to make a decision, and they wanted their daughters back in school, but they decided to keep them home because it was the school district that just couldn't make up their mind what they were going to do. And they're 11 and 9, my nieces, and they're like, we do not want to do the mental cycle with them that are they in, are they out, are they going home, and that transitioning so much for kids is a nightmare for them, even though they bounce back. They didn't want to handle that. So they decided, we're going to keep them at home until the school says, because the school had promised, we'll start to let kids back in as soon as we can. And my niece that's in 6th grade, she's now back in school, and then the little one's still at home, and they're looking, I think they're in Washington State, they're looking to transition back in. So that's what I wanted to say there. And then there was another thing, and I can't remember now what it was.
It's so much. We got to do a part 2 of this. Okay. We have to do a part 2.
And I can't remember what it was. It was with the lost students, but I lost the topic about the lost kids. Gosh darn it. I remember. Okay. One of the things is educators had to adjust. Like you said, you and I seem to be really tech savvy. Like, I embrace any new technology. I'm like, what? Tell me about it. I want to learn. Yeah. And I always try to teach that to, my students as well. But there's also the factor of what's too much. And just like in the classroom, you can't be those teachers that lecture, it's a 60-minute class and they lecture for 55 minutes. What does the students do? It's like, the same thing in this online world. We can't be throwing out every platform at the kids. You've got to connect to this one, to this one, to this one, to this one. Ding. Yes. And a lot of teachers were starting to do that, or principals are like, oh, you got to use this. And I had to tell my principal, like, hey, oh, no, like, do you realize that for one class, just my class, not let alone all their other subjects, you want my students to connect to 4 different platforms to access the book here, this other book? No. Yes. Like, number one, like, if we're trying to help the kids, that's not helping them by any means. And let alone the teachers. We have, how many different things are you going to throw at us? So that was something I wanted to touch base about, how we're handling it with, technology and everything. And I think the repercussions of it all, like, kids, we're sick and tired of this. We want real, authentic. This is real and authentic, but we don't want to be always on here.
Yes, correct. And I'm
Oh,
glad you said that, because I remember a student was like, I am jumping through hoops to turn in one assignment. And I think, you know, once the teachers were sent home and we started doing all that training to learn about the new technology to use to teach, I think, like you said, all these teachers were grabbing different things. And then, you know, you got a student here who has 6 classes, and all 6 teachers are using different platforms to
yeah,
give
yeah, yeah.
assignments, and all of that has to be downloaded on the computer and logged into. And then that is so frustrating for the student. I
Too much.
remember my kid, you know, she was trying to get this new program on her laptop, and she couldn't figure it out. And then she had access, and I'm technology savvy, and I was like, I can't do this. You need to go to your dad and ask him to try, because it was just, I was overwhelmed with all of the different
Or-
apps and things that you had to download. And so I think you're right. I think to move forward, our school district has adopted the virtual model. We will be moving forward with some virtual classes and in-person classes for the most part. But I think we're moving forward, we have to have a platform where we limit the use of all of these different apps
yeah,
and programs that we're requiring our students to
yeah,
use. So this has
yeah,
been great. I love this. This is
yeah.
new for me. I just thought that it was something that, you know, would be beneficial for the world to see. How are we doing it in different countries? And so I really appreciate you coming here today and doing this with me.
Yeah,
So
thank
is there anything else you want to share? I'm going to put your contact information
you. Okay,
in the show notes so
okay.
that people can reach out to you as well. But if there's anything else you want to share, let's do this again.
Yeah, let's do this. We can probably discuss all kinds of other little things, you know, especially from how they do things or anything in the school systems, et
Yeah,
cetera. So I enjoyed it. Yeah. And for, you know, I am an American. So for me, since I taught there, I know what's going on in the States, but it's always like state to state's quite different. So there's a
yeah,
lot of things to discuss there, from like, I can address Washington and Idaho. You've got, you know,
yeah.
Georgia, and then other connections, but also what's going on worldwide. Like I mentioned to you yesterday, I live in France. I haven't taught in France, but the French system has something going on that is kind of appealing to me. I'm always like, I like what they're doing. So that could be a
Okay.
conversation
Let's do it.
to talk about different models that exist in the world that, you know, they could work. You know,
Yeah,
they might be options for the future or might not, who knows? And so, or what's going on well in the States that we shouldn't be complaining about because
yeah,
other places have it way worse, or
yeah.
vice versa. But for me, you know, thank you for the time. You know, you guys can find me on, you know, yes, Facebook, Instagram. My latest baby's been my podcast, which is The Immigrant All Around, which is
Okay.
showcasing the stories of immigrants. So
Wow.
too many different passions, but still always focused on all of them at the same time and making connections like with you as well.
That's great. And I will put all of that in our show notes today. I want to just say thank you guys for watching. This is the Teachers Lounge. We are here every week. I'm here every week to provide you with tools and resources so that you can thrive. I want educators around the world to thrive. Thank you, Esther, for joining us today and sharing your knowledge as well. We will see you next week in the Teachers Lounge.
Yeah.
Have a good one.
Bye.